Welcome to Module 7. This week we are discussing about elements of information system security and with a particular focus on hardware and data security. Before I start this lecture, there are a couple of announcements that I want to make. A supplementary online test is up and available for you. It's available till 22nd of April. Please, if you want to attempt this test, please do so. But read the instructions before attempting this test. Second announcement is regarding your first assignment. There was an issue with Turnitin on Monday. That was beyond my control, and the students across the university had difficulties in uploading their assignment. That's why the time was extended till midnight, and the issue was resolved by 6:30 p.m. And what I have seen from the submission status that after that students were able to submit their assignment. It was mainly because of the slowness issue. Could be an issue of poor or below par stress testing of Turnitin. We don't know the exact reason, and I can't tell you the exact reason because it's not my domain. But it clearly appears to be an issue where there was a poor or below par stress testing. What is stress testing? Although it is not directly relevant to this unit, but it is a form of testing in which you test your hardware and software system, software application and hardware system, and try to find the position or time where that system gets stuck, where you're unable to use that system. And once you achieve that, once you come to know that particular point where the system gets stuck or stop responding, you then relate that particular time frame with your objectives that you have set for that particular system, and then you start doing minor tweakings to that system, whether it's hardware or software. What I want you to know out of this issue is which aim of security was breached primarily. Yes, it is availability. But was it the only issue that was breached, or can you think of any other issue, any other aim of security that was breached? It has not happened this time. It has happened to the students who were with me last year and with other units as well, that when they upload their assignment, Turnitin takes time in uploading the assignment, and that process keeps on going and going and going. But yet after maybe 10-15 minutes, they get confirmation that they have uploaded their assignment. But if you go and look at your assignment, what you have submitted, all the formatting that you have done in your Word document, all the formatting gets unformatted. So all the headings, all different kind of text that you have used, all different type of styles that you have used, they all vanish. So this could be related to an issue or breach of data integrity. It is not what you have submitted. So what I would suggest you all that if you haven't done this till now, go back and look at your assignment that you have submitted. Is it the same that you actually developed before submitting, or is it something different that you can see? Because once I download, or the marker will download that assignment for marking, obviously they will have something different than what you actually wanted us to see before marking. Okay, so it is primarily an issue of availability, but it is also an issue of data integrity. If you want to further strengthen your understanding on the aims of security, whether 3 or 5, try to relate all sorts of issues that you come across in your daily life with the IT technologies that you are using, because this is how you will be able to understand all these concepts in a better way. There will be no class next week. Next week is dedicated for the makeup classes. We haven't missed any regular lecture, and we won't be missing any regular lecture after we come back from these 2 weeks break. So we will not be having any class next week. The week after is mid-semester break, so we won't be meeting on 24th of April as well. And I'll see you again in this hall on 1st of May for Module 8. And that month will be the last month. We will be finishing all our 4 lectures. And then the 5th lecture will be regarding the summary, what we have studied throughout the semester, and what you should expect in the exam, where I will be discussing about the exam format and all that stuff. In these 2 weeks, I will be making your exam, so I will have a clear idea what I have written in your exam, and I will be giving you some clues, some hints during the next 5 weeks. The last week will be a comprehensive week, but I may give you some more hints during the 4 weeks in which we will be discussing about different computer security topics. My advice for 2 weeks, enjoy your breaks, but while you're enjoying, please get out of this supplementary test as soon as possible. This is just 5% of your total marks. I have allowed backtracking as well, so you have got 90 minutes. You can sleep while attempting that test. You have got only 25 questions. I have added 10 new questions, and 15 questions are the same from the last test. But the questions are very simple. You should be able to answer those questions within 30 or 40 minutes maximum if you want to utilize the facility of backtracking, and if you want to use Google as much as you can. But as soon as possible, try to get rid of this supplementary online test and then start focusing on your second assignment. I would suggest you in these 2 weeks, you should be able to find out the issues in the scenario that I have given you. While you are required to list 5 issues, I would suggest you going for more than 5 issues and then discuss those 5 issues with your peers, with yourself, do some more research, and then out of those many issues, try to find 5 issues which you feel that are more appropriate or more directly relevant to the scenario that I have given you. Do not just stick to the 5 issues. I have been receiving emails from some of these students, and I am advising them all that try to look into some other issues. You might find some issues from today's lecture, and you might include those issues in your second assignment. Keep in mind the submission date. Do not start your work at the 11th hour. Do not submit your assignment at 2 p.m. on the 20th of May, because you may end up again with this availability issue. And it's easy for me to extend the time, but it is difficult for you to absorb that situation. I know some of the students were freaking out that whether you're going to deduct our marks and issues like that. So try to submit your assignment well before the due date and due time. Look at the report requirements and the rubrics to score good marks. What I have seen so far in the first assessment, that some of these students have not, it is obvious that they have not looked at the report submission requirements and the rubrics. That's why I can see some of the issues that should not have been there if those students would have read the submission instructions and the rubrics, because it is the rubrics on which the marker will mark your assignments. Any questions related to any of these announcements that I've made so that we can start our lecture? Yes? Sorry? So there are 2 options. One is standard and one is the LAP, learning and assessment. Students who are on LAP. So students who are on LAP will get extra time as compared to the other students. So, but if you are not on LAP, then don't attempt that test, because I will be getting a prompt that if you have attempted a LAP test and you are not on LAP, then I will get a prompt that this student has attempted this test, so you will end up getting a 0. The time is more than enough. It's 90 minutes for the normal students, and those who are on LAP who need extra time, extra assistance, they will be getting 2 hours to answer those 25 questions. Okay? let's formally start discussion on today's lecture. We will be briefly touching upon physical security after discussing the key elements of information system security, and then we will focus on hardware and data security because that directly relates to the unit learning outcome of this unit. There are three elements of information system security. One is logical security, the other is physical security, which is our primary topic today, which is also known as infrastructure security, and the last is premises security, which can also be termed as corporate or facilities security. We can define logical security as a security that protects computer-based data from software-based and communication-based threats. We can define physical security, which is also known as infrastructure security, as security measures that protects the information systems that contain data and the people who use those information systems or those data, operate and maintain those systems. A compromise in a physical security may lead to a compromise in a logical security. Because physical security also prevents any type of physical access or intrusion that can compromise logical security. Premises security is different to physical security. It is better to understand the difference between these two concepts because often people, even in the industry, try to relate these two concepts together, whereas these two terminologies are different. We can define premises security as a security measure that protects the people and property within an entire area, facility, or buildings, and is usually required by laws, regulations, and fiduciary obligations. So it is not, we are not talking about the boundary walls or the outer premises. We are talking about all kind of premises within an organization. One kind of premises security is can be termed as a boundary wall security, which is the main entry point of an organization or main entry point of this university. But if this university has got a data center in this campus, if you go near to the data center, they will have some more security. So that security also falls under the definition of premises security. It includes premises security, access control, smoke and fire detection, fire suppression system, your surveillance system, your environmental protection means that you have employed around that information system that you are using, and alarms and guards. Since we are focusing on physical security, there are two key elements, two key requirements when we talk about physical security that we need to address if we want to ensure a secure system. The first requirement is related to the damage, and the second requirement is related to the misuse. The first requirement can be formally defined as physical security that must prevent damage to the physical infrastructure that houses that information system. And the second requirement for the physical security is defined as physical security that must prevent misuse of the physical infrastructure, and any misuse, any mishap leads to misuse or damage of that protected information. We'll further discuss these two key requirements in next few slides. The first requirement has got certain subsystems. One is it covers information system hardware, any damage to information system hardware, any damage to physical facilities, any damage to the supporting facilities around that information system, and any damage to the personnel that are involved in using and operating or maintaining those information systems. Information system hardware relates to data processing and storage equipment, networking facilities, and offline storage media. Physical facility relates to building and other structures housing that particular information system and the networking components, your switches, your routers, your edge devices as well. Supporting facilities includes electrical power, communication services, and environmental controls. These communication services are different to networking components, do not relate. Networking components means we are talking about physical hardware and router, And communication services, we are focusing on the telephone lines and the data communication lines, like Cat6 and Cat7 cables, or the fiber optic cables that are running through that particular organization or building. Any damage to personnel also falls under this requirement, and it involves humans who control, maintain, and use those information systems. Regarding the second requirement for the physical security, which relates to misuse, and any misuse to physical infrastructure further leads to misuse of damage of the protected information. This damage could be accidental, could be malicious, it could be an act of vandalism, it could be an act of theft of equipment, theft of copying some critical information, theft of services, or any issue that relates to unauthorized entry of an individual. There are many ways we can categorize physical threats. In this unit, in today's discussion, we are focusing on these three categories of physical security, and these three categories are broadly accepted categories. There could be other categories that you may come across, but these three categories are the ones that are broadly accepted in the security community, be it academic research community or the people who are working in the industry. The three categories that relates to physical security threats are environmental threats, technical threats, and threats that are caused by the humans. Environmental threats also includes natural disasters. And natural disasters include hurricanes, earthquake, tornadoes, ice storm, blizzard, lightning, or flood. So there are people, you might come across an article, a book, or some information on a web page that says that environmental threats are different from natural disasters. That's not correct. Natural disasters are part and parcel of environmental threats. That's why I've given it special focus on this slide. Other than the natural disasters, environmental threats can be defined as the conditions in the environment that can damage or interrupt the service information systems and the data those systems contain. It could be because of inappropriate temperature or humidity. When we talk about temperature, the systems that we use, the servers that our data is deployed, or services that run those services, they work on a certain temperature. If that temperature exceeds or that temperature goes below their specific limit, we will end up in a problem. So it is very important for the information systems, especially for the server rooms and the networking components, that we maintain the temperature in which they operate effectively. If the temperature gets increased or they get below their defined limit, we may end up in a problem. Another issue related to environmental threats is humidity. Humidity leads to corrosion, and once the system is corroded, the performance gets degraded. That's why the military, the naval arm of the military, or the other organization like shipping or people who work in the sea, they are recommended to use military-grade computers, because those military-grade computers or military-grade laptops or any military-grade information computing device is endorsed with those kind of environment. They are less prone to corrosion. They will end up getting corroded, but the time by which they will get corrosion is much longer than if you use a normal device on board those ships, or whether it's a military ship, warship, or shipping, or any other survey ship. So humidity is also very important in environmental threats. The other environmental threat I can discuss with you is fire and smoke. We do deploy fire and smoke alarm systems, but once we use them, and if we use water as part of the fire suppression system, we will end up compromising our hardware devices. The other environmental threat which is not directly relevant to information systems, but they may affect that system that we are using or we are dependent upon, is because of chemical, radiological and biological hazards. They could be as a result of accidental or intentional intrusion. Both are possible. Dust is another environmental threat that affects the performance of the information system that we are using, and then the infestation, like living organisms, in molds, insects, and other rodents that we may find if we don't have any good control against these insects or rodents. The second category of physical security threats is threats that are related to technical threats. We can define technical threats as threats that are related to electrical power and electromagnetic emissions or EMI emissions. Under voltage, over voltage, another problem with the electric power. Electrical noise generated by motors, fans, heavy equipment, etc. can cause intermittent problems with the computer that we are using. And emissions that are generated from the devices, such as even our mobile devices, they also generate some emissions which are known as low intensity emissions. The example I have included in this slide is related to cellular technology or commercial radio stations. They also interfere with the sensitive electronic equipment. That's why the data centers or the data centers of the sensitive organizations, they are required or recommended to have protection against these EMI radiations. So they deploy the aluminum foils and other relevant materials when they design, when they construct their data centers. The last category that is related to physical security of threat is the threats that are caused by humans. As we have been discussing about human involvement or compromise that are related to the humans throughout this semester, this kind of threat is very difficult to deal with as compared to environmental and technical threats. We can use UPSs, we can use multiple power sources, we can use an effective fire and smoke alarm systems and suppression system, but we have got specific measures which we can use when we deal with environmental and technical threats. But when we talk about human threats, the flexibility or the mechanism that we can deploy in an organizations are very less, and it's very difficult to deal with threats that are related to human beings. Why? Because they are very less predictable. You don't know an employee when that employee can become disgruntled and start compromising the security of the organization and starts sharing the secret information of the organization with the people who are not involved with the organization. Even if you have got good environmental and technical protection available, a human element can always weak those threats, those preventive measures. And it also helps in finding the most vulnerable point of attack in a system or in an organization. So if you launch a social engineering attack against the employee of an organization on which you want to compromise, you might end up getting some information, and based on that information, the information that you have gathered, you might be able to find that most vulnerable point, and then you launch an attack against that vulnerable point. So that is the most serious threat among all categories of threats that we have just discussed, and it's very difficult to employ any effective measure against this threat. You need to have continuous training all the time. You need to have good accountability, good auditing, so that you need to have good operating and environment. You need to have good network operations center and security operations center where you can track the movements of your employees, track the activities of your employees, so that you can find who is the employee who is working which is not relevant or which is something that you don't expect in a normal operation in your organization. Human caused threats includes unauthorized physical access into an organization, into a critical system, into a data center. Human caused threats, human based threats includes theft, they include vandalism, they include misuse. When we talk about misuse, we mean improper use of resources by those who are authorized, and also use of resources by those who are not authorized to use that particular system. So any kind of misuse by the persons who are authorized to use that system, and human beings who are working in that organization, but they are not allowed to use that particular system, any kind of misuse falls under this category. Since we are focusing more on hardware security and data security, we will, and they both are relevant to physical security, so we are focusing our further discussion on these two topics. So when you talk about hardware security, in the olden days, when we used to talk about computer security issues, we only used to talk about the security issues that are relevant to the hardware security. Why? Because we had huge systems. We didn't have the flexibility of mobile phones or the smart or the end computers in abundance, and we were focusing mainly on the access control mechanism of that huge computer system that was deployed in that particular room or that particular organization. So in those days, computer security issues were all relevant to securing that particular hardware, the huge giant hardware device, that server. But as the technology has improved, the definition of computer security has changed manifolds, and it has now become more complex. Why? Because we all have become more mobile. We have got our laptops, our smart devices, our mobile phones, and that's where the security issues have become more complex. Our devices have become interconnected because of the internet or intranet that we are using, and some of the environmental factors which are beyond our control. The most serious issue here is the issue related to BYOD, bring your own devices. This has further aggravated the security issues. People who are involved with implementing security controls, they hate, they don't like the concept of bring your own devices. It's a model that allows employees to use their own computing devices at work. So I'm not talking about specifically about this university, but organizations who have to maintain their competition in the industry, when they allow bring your own devices to their employees, they are allowing their employees to bring their own devices to the work, and they are allowing their employees to use those devices while at home or while anywhere when they are traveling, when they're not in the organization. So what happens is that confidential companies' data gets stored in those BYOD devices. So the questions that the security professionals need to answer are how you're going to save that data that is secured, that is saved on BYOD devices. Who has now access to that data? Because when you go to your home, you might give your BYOD device to your family, to your kids, to your partners, to your friends. So they will be able to look at that data if you have not employed other security controls on the BYOD devices. So the organizations have actually lost security control on those BYOD devices. So this leads to a number of security issues. So that's why having a BYOD device in an organization leads to a number of security issues, and it literally becomes a challenge for the security professionals or the information system security professionals who are employed in those organizations to actually ask all those employees to adhere to the instructions or to the policies that are there in that organization. So this has become a challenge, a serious challenge. I conducted a study maybe 2-3 years ago in one of the high school in Perth, and they allowed the BYOD concept, and they were having some different issues in their organization, their school. And when we actually analyzed their security posture, we found out that there is a serious issue with the policies that they have employed with their BYOD concept, and the students were easily downloading the malicious softwares, and there was no mechanism. And once because the students were allowed to download any kind of software on their computer, and they are on their smartphones or on their Mac devices or Android devices or Windows devices. So when they were connecting their device with with their school network, all those viruses were going into their servers, and their information security was being compromised. And why? Because there was no effective security control. So then we proposed some security measures to that school. Whether they have implemented those controls, I had no concern, but this is what we found out with that particular high school when they approached us in analyzing their security posture, because they were having some they were having some issues in their system. And the single issue we found out was because of BYOD devices. So any organization, if you are working in an organization that allows BYOD devices, and if you are the information system security professional, you need to be very cautious, very considerate about the security controls that you have implemented in your organization. When we talk about threats that are relevant to computer hardware, there are many. I have listed few here. It could be theft of hardware devices. It could be because of environmental threats. It could be physical destruction of hardware devices, accidental damage. It could be loss, misplacement of your storage media, your USB devices, and other such things, and issues that are related to hardware age or the stress of the hardware. The single point I wanted to discuss out of this slide to you is something that is highlighted in green color. Why we break into a network and dodge an intrusion detection system, defeating the operating system controls or bypass security software when it may be easier to steal an unauthorized smartphone. So if your organization has allowed BYOD and you are using your smartphone to access the company's resources and you're saving critical information on your mobile phone, why would someone needs to bypass the security controls, whether they're hardware security control or physical security or software security controls, if you can get access to an unauthorized smartphone, unauthorized laptop, unattended smartphone, unattended laptop, or unattended USB stick, and you can get some critical information out of those devices. So that's why it has become, theft of hardware has become such a serious concern. Since we have given 2 weeks on cryptography, specifically to encryption, I have included these 3 slides on hardware encryption. What is a hardware encryption? Or what is a hardware-based encryption solution? They are extra devices that we install on our computers, on our motherboards, and they have got a dedicated processor, they've got a dedicated memory, they've got a firmware, and this processor, memory, and firmware is used for authentication and encryption. Why it is effective? It is effective because this process is kept separate from the rest of the machine. So the normal processor, normal RAM, and the normal I/O devices are not affected by if you have got a hardware-based encryption solution in your computing device, because all the overheads will be taken care by that extra hardware encryption device. So your normal processor, normal I/O devices will not be affected. So you will not feel any performance degradation in the system that you're using. Hardware encryption devices, they are often tamper resistant because they are tested by government agencies. One such example I can give you, and you can read more about this product, is Silicon Data Vault, SDV. I don't know whether their current product is endorsed by Australian Signal Directorate, but once their product was endorsed by the ASD, which was then part of Australian Department of Defense. So they recommended that we can trust on Silicon Data Vault. So often these hardware encryption devices are tested by or endorsed by the government agencies, and that develop more trust. They are expensive. This is the negative side of having a hardware-based encryption solution, but they are more reliable as compared to software-based encryption and authentication solution. These are the differences between a hardware-based encryption device or a solution and a software-based solution. We know that hardware-based solution use a dedicated processor, RAM, and they take the load of out of your normal processing devices. Processor is able to generate pseudo-random numbers at their own, and they are able to generate the encryption keys at their own without affecting any of the normal processing device in your computer. It increases the system performance, and it protects against the cold boot attacks and the malicious codes. Whereas the software-based encryption, it shares your normal computing resources. They are less expensive as compared to hardware-based encryption devices, but they are susceptible to, or they are prone to brute force attacks and memory attacks. As a mitigation strategy, we can use microdot technologies, RFID tagging on hardware devices, CCTV monitoring. We can use logs that you can see on the slide. We can use access control, secured storage of portables that we use in our organization, and we can also use mobile device tracking to mitigate the hardware theft. We can use all sorts of security controls to mitigate the hardware thefts, but there are some espionage activities that are still possible. One of that user espionage activity I wanted to share with you is keyboard acoustic emissions. So researchers, I have listed 3, there are many, have successfully demonstrated that how attackers can record the keystroke sounds and reconstruct what the user has typed. So whatever I'm typing on my keyboard, those keystroke analysis can perform, and the attacker will be able to regenerate whatever keys I have pressed on my keyboard. So if I've entered my password, or if I've entered some critical information through my keyboard acoustic emissions can lead to regeneration of or reconstruction of those keys. The other kind of user espionage against hardware is hardware keyloggers. The keylogger that you can see at your left is a simple key grabber. The one in the middle is a key grabber with a Wi-Fi facility. And the last key grabber shown in, which you can see at the right side of the slide, is where you can connect multiple keyboards, and it has got its own memory where you can save gigabytes of data, and once you save that data, you can then process that data and get critical information or reconstruct whatever user has typed. So the example I can give you is that we all go to the libraries, and we use physical computers that are there in the library, in the public spaces, and we might end up using a computer that is equipped with any one of this device, and we have got no idea. If this device is installed at the back of the CPU, we won't be even bothered to look at the back of that CPU, and whatever we are typing, this key grabber will be saving whatever we are typing here. So as a result, the attacker entity can always go later and take out this USB, or if that attacker is using the key grabber that is shown in the middle, that attacker will be able to reconstruct or all the keys that you have pressed on the fly while you're typing. The attacker will be able to reconstruct whatever you have typed. So this is the issue when we go to the public places and use the devices that are there free for use to all of us. Have you heard of Wi-Fi pineapples? So these pineapples were, when they were first introduced, they were introduced for by the ethical hackers, or for the ethical hackers, or for the pen testers. They were designed with the idea that allows an ethical hacker or a pen tester to find the vulnerable points in an organization. So this Wi-Fi pineapple used to help assist all those information security professionals to identify what are the vulnerabilities, what are the weaknesses, what are the loopholes in a particular organization, and then from there on they were able to suggest or implement some security controls to overcome that vulnerability or that weakness. But once these devices were introduced, they are now being used more by the cyber criminals. And I can give you a scenario example, because we have been conducting some research for past many years, is public Wi-Fi hotspots. We all love using free Wi-Fi in the hotels, in the cafes, if you want to go for a coffee, we would rather prefer to use the Wi-Fi that is provided by that restaurant, that hotel, or that cafe, rather than using our own mobile data. So what people have done, without even getting the consent of that cafeteria, people deploy, or the attackers or the cyber criminals deploy their Wi-Fi pineapple, and that Wi-Fi pineapple actually generate the same SSID, that is a legitimate SSID that is used by that particular cafeteria. And once that your mobile device sees that, once you're connected, you're authorized, you're connected with that cafeteria. So once next beacon signal will be sent, you might end up getting connected with that rogue access point, which is a Wi-Fi pineapple. So once you are connected with your Wi-Fi, with that rogue access point or that Wi-Fi pineapple, all your traffic will be going through that rogue access point or that Wi-Fi pineapple, and the attacker will be, or the cyber criminal will be able to look whatever you are doing. If you are using a non-secure website, will be able to find all your critical information, your passwords, all your security questions, and all sorts of information that you are exchanging using that rogue access point or that Wi-Fi pineapple. So this is the example of man-in-the-middle attack. All such attacks are known as man-in-the-middle attacks. What about physical damage? As we have discussed in the earlier slides, hardware can be accidentally damaged deliberately or accidentally. So what is the most effective means, or what is the most effective mean of this kind of damage? Backups. Backups are the best means to address physical damage to hardware, but the question is, how many people perform daily backups? There won't be many. And if you damage your smartphone now, or if that mobile phone gets damaged accidentally, or you're unable to use your mobile phone, how would you restore your data? What steps would you take to recover your data? How would you get your contact information? What if you have stored your work data on your smartphone? So if you do not have an effective backup policy at the individual level or at the organization level, you will end up getting these questions and you will not be having any answer to these questions. Backups are the key elements of business continuity and disaster recovery plan, BCP and BRP and DRP. We have discussed these concepts in module 2. So these are the backups are the key element of business continuity plan or a disaster recovery plan. Also, its hardware and storage media have a life, and that life may result in a loss or corruption of critical data. So if you lose your hard disk at certain point, if you're dependent on your laptop and you do not have any effective backup strategy, then you will end up losing your critical information. Backups are critical when security measures have failed and important information gets corrupted, or at the very least cannot be trusted. Just think about ransomware. I believe majority of you have taken ransomware as one malware for your first assessment. So think about malware. If malware encrypts all of your data, and if you do not have any backup, how would you recover or restore your data? The single most effective solution or countermeasure against ransomware is backup, because you cannot trust on the fact that even if you pay to the attacker, will you be able to get your data back? Whether your data has been compromised, will you be getting the same data that was encrypted as a result of that ransomware? So the single most effective measure against ransomware is having backups of all your critical information. When we talk about backup strategy, there are a few factors that we need to take into consideration. And these factors are how frequently you conduct your backup activity, how extensive do you do your backups, whether it's a full backup, differential backup, incremental or delta backup. We will discuss these four terminologies in the next few slides. What is the process of conducting backups? Who is responsible to undertake those backup activities? Where you will store your backups, whether you will store your backups offline or will you store your backup on-site or off-site? How long you will keep your backup? How many copies of the backup will you be maintaining? Will you be maintaining your backup in plain text or in encrypted text? So you need to answer these questions while developing your backup strategy. And these questions will have different answers depending on the organization for which we are developing this backup strategy, or depending on the critical information that organization actually deals with. When we talk about strategies that are related to when we are developing when we are answering these questions, these 8 questions, backup is more than simply copying all the required files on a different storage media or at a different location. We need to consider size of the backup, type of the backup, and the time required to conduct that backup. You can't just blindly rely on having a full backup all the time, because then you will end up getting not wasting. You will have to bear a longer duration of time for that activity to get finished. So you need to list what is best for that particular organization. While you consider the size and time, you need to consider how frequently the backup will occur and the type of storage media that you are using to undertake those backup activity. There are 4 types of backup: full, differential, incremental, and delta. When we talk about full backup, all files and software are copied onto the storage media every time. It requires large space, but the restoration is simple. If your data gets corrupted or if you are being attacked by a ransomware, the restoration is very simple. You just have to copy that data and restore onto your main system. But the flip side is it takes considerable amount of time. In making a backup copy and in restoration. When we talk about differential backup, in differential backup, only the files and software that have been changed since the last full backup was completed are backed up. So we are not taking a full backup every time. We are just taking the backup of the files that have been changed once we take the full backup. But it is dependent on full backup. You need to take the full backup at least once, or you need to take the full backup periodically. It requires medium space, but restoration is simple. There are two things when you have to restore if you're using differential backup in your organization. You need to have a last full backup, and then once you load your last full backup, you then load your last differential backup. When we talk about incremental backup, there's a very slight difference between incremental backup and differential backup. Incremental backup backs up only the files that have changed since the last full or incremental backup occurred, thus requiring fewer files to be backed up. It requires medium space, but its restoration is not simple. You need to be involved once you are restoring a backup that was created using incremental backup strategy. It is also dependent on full backup. You need to have at least one full backup, or you need to take periodical full backups in order to have incremental backup implemented. So what is the difference between differential and incremental backup? Both begin with full backup. You need to have full backup. Differential backup contains all of the data that has changed since the last full backup. Is it clear? Differential backup contains all of the data that has changed since you have taken the last full backup. Whereas incremental backup, it only includes the data or the files that have been changed since the previous backup, not the previous full backup. Okay? So this is the key difference between incremental backup and the differential backup. Yes? In differential backup, you need to have two requirements. First requirement is you need to take full backup, whether you take it once or you take it periodically. This requirement also exists in incremental backup as well. But once in the differential backup, once you have taken the full backup, all the subsequent backups will back up all the files that have been changed since the last full backup was undertaken. So for example, if you have taken at the first iteration, you have taken your full backup, and now for the first time you're taking the differential backup, you will copy the files that have been changed since that full backup. If you will take second cycle for the differential backup, you will again back up the file that was backed up in the first iteration as well. You get my point? You've got full backup, and you have changed one Word document. When you will take your first differential backup, only that one single Word document will be backed up. In the second iteration, before second iteration, you have changed an Excel document. So once the second iteration will take place, you will again copy that Word document and the Excel document. Okay? Whereas in the incremental backup, or any change in the Word document, you will again save that whole document, When we talk about incremental backup, we will take the full backup. In the first iteration, we will copy that Word document only because that is the only file that has been changed. In the second iteration, we will only copy the Excel file, not the Word document. Okay? So that's why if you look at the last bullet, incremental backup only includes the data that has changed since the previous backup. This could be an exam question, so try to Try to write in your own words. There's no need to remember this, whatever is written on the slides. This backup is a very critical component, and it has always become part of the exam. And I find no reason not to have a question on the backup in the exam. So there will be a question. Could be a different question, could be the same question, differentiate between incremental or differential backups. But you will have one question on backup in your exam. Differential backups have shorter restore times, whereas the incremental backups have shorter backup times. In differential backup, full backup is restored and then the latest backup. Whereas in incremental, full and then all the incremental backups are restored. So that's why incremental backup takes more time when you have to restore as compared to differential backup. The last type of backup strategy is delta backup. And we can define delta backup as when we backup as little information as possible each time you perform a backup. It requires small space, but restoration is complex. Occasional full backup is required for delta backup to be effective, and only the portion of files that have been changed are restored. Not the entire file is replaced, only that particular the change that has happened in that particular file, only that file will be restored or will be backed up or restored. The example I can give you here is related to databases. You all know that a database consists of many tables, and each table contains many records, could be thousands of rows. So in all other types of backups, you will have to back up the entire database, or you'll have to back up the entire table. When we talk about delta backup, we are only concerned about that particular record that has been changed. So even we will not even back up the entire table. We will back up only the records that have been changed since the last backup was taken. And same procedure would be performed when we restore that backup. There are two types of backups. One is on-site, the other one is off-site. On-site backup is useful for a localized failure, such as if hard drive is failed in a PC. This is very useful. However, this is prone to a number of issues, number of environmental threats. What if a facility is destroyed in case of a fire and the backup gets destroyed as well? How would you restore that data? So will end up, there will be no point of having a backup if you have stored that backup in the on-site location. That's why we introduced the concept of off-site backups. Off-site backups are stored in a geographically distant or a separate location from the system from where we have backed up that data. It alleviates the risk of losing backups when stored on-site. So any kind of fire or any other environmental threat to that particular venue or location may compromise your entire building, entire information system, but you will still be able to restore your data because you have saved your data using the concept of off-site backups at a different location. The other key concept with backups is how do we protect our backups? Ideally, we should be giving backups the same level of protection or security as the primary source. So it has got all your critical information. So all security controls that you have implemented at your primary source should be applicable, should be deployed on your backup data, whether you have secured that data on-site or off-site. However, we usually or often do not consider protection of backups as critical as our primary source is. An example I can give you is backup tapes. They may be stored poorly, and if they are stored poorly, you will end up losing your data because tape has got life. They are prone to a number of threats that we have discussed earlier in today's lecture. So if you are relying on backup tapes and you have not stored them in a secure place, they are prone to any kind of environmental threat, to dust and other kind of misuse. So you will end up compromising your data that you have backed up on the tape drives. An attacker may specifically target the backup media if you have not employed the same protection mechanism or same security controls. The more copies of backups that exist, the harder it is to control the access and storage of those backups. You need to have your backup encrypted. It is recommended. They need to be fireproof. They need to be placed in a location which has got a higher safety, higher security, because it contains your critical information. You might not have heard of this concept of data sovereignty. It's a new phenomenon, but it is relevant to backup strategies. You might be knowing about what is sovereignty about a nation, sovereignty of a country. But what is data sovereignty? Several countries have enacted laws that contain types of data that must be stored within the boundaries. If we talk about Australia, they might have got a law they might have got a law for a specific type of data, for sensitive data, that restrict an organization or that sensitive organization not to have their backup outside Australia. We are all using cloud computing, and we have got no idea where that cloud exists, whether that cloud exists within Australia or in some other country. So when we talk about data sovereignty, it is the laws that have been developed or enacted by a country restricting an organization not to back up their sensitive information outside that particular country. Okay? The example I have included on this slide is from LinkedIn. Russian authorities wanted all the data that LinkedIn was storing for the Russian citizens to be stored on the servers that are deployed within Russia. But LinkedIn evaluated that requirement, and they end up they have done some cost-benefit analysis, and they end up losing that market because they were not agreeing to the requirement that was set by the Russian authorities. And they, in Russia, Russian people, or in Russia, LinkedIn cannot be used because of data sovereignty laws that were enacted by the Russian authorities or the Russian government. Okay. Alternative sites is another concept when we talk about backup or when we talk about physical security mitigation strategies. If you have got a good backup strategy, but you have got no alternate site to restore that backup data, what is the point of having that backup? In backup, you store your information, you store your data. But what if your entire data center that gets damaged? And you have got a copy of your data from an off-site location. You have got your full backup, everything intact. How would you restore your services if you do not have an alternative site? You have protected your data because you had a very good backup strategy. How would you restore your services? So that's why we discuss the concept of alternative sites. So there are three types of alternative sites. One is hot site, warm site, and cold site. Which site we should be using? There is no defined answer. Depends on the organization and the type of work that organization conducts. But we need to understand these the differences between these three types of alternative sites. Hot site is fully configured environment similar to normal operating environment that can be operational immediately or within few hours. So an hot site is an exact replica of your primary source. Everything that you have got in your primary data center, you will have that equipment, everything up and ready in your alternative site, and that site will be termed as hot site. You just need to take your data and you just need to go there and load your data and restore your services from there. When you talk about warm site is a partially configured location. It usually have the peripherals and softwares, but not the more expensive main processing computer. So you will have the software components, you will have the peripherals, but you will not have the main server or main servers that runs or that process that data or that runs those services. So these kind of sites can be made operational within few days, because you need to arrange a server, whether you arrange a server up to of the similar capacity or a low capacity server, you will have to arrange that server. But since you have got other softwares and other peripheral devices already deployed at that warm site, you will be having you can make operational that warm site within few days. Depending on the type of organization, we have got another concept which is known as cold site. And a cold site is a site that has got the basic environmental controls that are necessary to operate, but few computing components necessary for processing that information or to run those services. So if you have got a cold site and if your main environment gets damaged, and you have got the concept of cold site implemented in your organization, it will take weeks to restore your normal services. Redundancy is another important concept when we talk about disaster recovery plan or business continuity plan. We can define redundancy as the most essential element of recovery from physical security breaches. Although it does not safeguard from the breaches that are related to confidentiality, it provides recovery from loss of data. So if you have got in your organization, if you have got a concept of hot site, you can easily say that I have got a redundant site and I can make my system operational within few hours. So you have got redundant services, redundant sites, redundant backups available every time to run your business smoothly. It uses multiple independent elements to perform a critical function, so that if one fails, there is another that can take over. As I've explained, it could be through the use of redundant servers, redundant networking connections, redundant ISP or service provider connections. And it not only talks about or covers the hardware side, it also talks about the data security. Because if you have got multiple backups available, that is an example of having redundant backups or redundant data. The last concept I wanted to discuss with you is about remnant data. What is a remnant data? Can anyone tell me? So yes, you're right. When you delete a file from your hard disk, or when you quick format your USB stick or any of the storage media, do you know what actually happens? So the information of the file is deleted from the MBR, master boot record. The actual file the actual sector or where your actual file is stored never gets deleted. And people, when they delete their data, they get this false confidence that we have deleted all our information, and then they can share their storage medias with their friends. They often sell that storage medias to the people who buy those used devices. So people have conducted, even in this university, we have conducted research in which we actually purchased used storage media from eBay and other such providers, and then we ran some forensic tools, and we have extracted some information. We extracted information from those purchased used devices, and we were able to easily retrieve all the information, all the critical or personal information from those devices, only because people were not aware, or people were having this false confidence that since I have deleted this information, I have formatted this, I have used the quick format option, all of the information has been deleted from this particular storage media. Okay, so this concept is known as remnant data. While it helps a law enforcement agency in solving a crime, it also helps cyber criminals in getting the personal information or the critical information or to perform the industrial espionage activities against their competitors. So how to deal about this issue, remnant data? We need to use some secure file deletion tools. So what are file deletion tools? They erase the hard drive, they erase the storage media, but how do they erase them? By rewriting bytes multiple times on every sector of that storage media. Not single time, not one time, multiple times. So this is the only solution against remnant data, using secure file deletion tools. But the question is, how many times would you use rewriting that particular bits of data? If you look at this picture that is there on the slide, there is one Gutman method that uses 35 passes. So every single sector is written by raw bits of data 35 times. This appears to be a very secure mean against remnant data, but what if you have to format your hard drive, which is 1 terabyte of size? It is going to take considerable amount of time. Okay? Then there's another US Department of Defense recommended method that uses 7 passes. There's another US DoD method that uses 3 passes. And then there is a pseudo-random data method which uses 1 pass. So it depends how much time you can give. Blindly, I would say this is the most secure mean of erasing a data. But if you have to erase a large storage device, you will end up having months waiting for this process to finish. So it depends on the type of information that is there on the hard drive or on the storage media, and how much comfortable you are in selling that information, selling that hard drive, and how much time you want to spend in deleting and erasing that information permanently. Sorry? These are the options that you give to when you use this tool. This is the option. It goes to every cluster, and it deletes the cluster values because every cluster. Can you save your file on one cluster? Have you got idea about computer fundamentals? the cylinder of the hard drives and things like that. Have you done computer fundamentals? So we are talking about more hardware specific stuff. We discussed the hard drive architecture in one of the module. I don't remember which module it was, where I showed you the cylinder and the clusters of the hard drive. So every cluster, you are unable to save your file in your cluster area, in one cluster, because of the file size. Every cluster has got a fixed size. So if your file size, if your data is larger than that particular cluster size, you take that cluster, you take that file, you save one chunk of that file in that particular cluster, and then you take the other chunk of the file and save it to another cluster, which may not be at which may be at the random location, not at the continuous location. So it deletes those information as well, this cluster tip area. Sorry? Everything. If you have got the idea about slack space, yes, it deletes everything. But it also depends on the tool that you are using. The tool, I did a reading in today's reading material on secure file deletion. You should read that. That is the basic reading, and you should once you read that web page, you should do some further readings to strengthen your concept, your understanding on secure file deletion and remnant data. It depends on the tool. You know, a tool, if you're using an open source tool, they might be making huge claims that we run this Gutman process for 35 times, and yet we give you, yet if we perform this activity in 1 day or 2 days, you know, but they might not be doing this activity in totality. They might be compromising something in their implementation. You might be using some commercial tool that might have got some weakness in that tool, you know. So you will have to evaluate different tools before deciding which tool you should be using to get out of this issue of remnant data. Okay. So this brings us to the end of today's lecture. Today's tutorial activities is about some questions, if you want to answer, if you can answer. What we have discussed all these topics, all these issues in today's lecture. Once you answer these questions, then you have got some practical stuff to do. Everything is cleared step by step. All these tools are available up on Blackboard. You can use these tools and just play around with these tools, these activities, because it will further strengthen your idea about computer security or security in general or information security. That's it. I will see you all after 2 weeks. Enjoy your break. Get out of your supplementary online quiz. Start reading your and finding the issues for your second assignment, and come up with some questions when we meet again in 2 weeks after. And if you've got questions in between, send me an email. I will be available and I will be answering those emails to answer your questions. Thank you very much.